The reason why we're here today is to show appreciation to all the board and staff of the nonprofits of the Greater Lowell area. Thank you for all your work. We are also here to acknowledge the importance of the nonprofit sector of our community. In particular, the amazing work people did during the pandemic to keep people fed and housed and supported during the height of the pandemic with services such as supplying vaccines, providing masks, COVID tests, and providing COVID-related information, which was vital. And I wanted to share a quote that someone gave me to add a little inspiration to the morning. Some people, when they watch TV, see something terrible has happened and they change the channel. Some people see something's terrible and then they say someone should do something about that, and then they change the channel. And then the third group, which is all the people that are here today, they see something bad happening on TV and they say, I need to go out and help. So they shut off the TV and then they come out and then they do something about it. And that is from the former president of Whirlpool, I believe, from a Habitat for Humanity build. So I thought that'd be good to share today. We also have the town manager from Dracut, and Ann Vandal, and she's gonna come up and say a little welcome because we're in Dracut.
A little short. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming out here in town of Dracut and visiting us. This facility has served us well, and I'm sure many of you have been here on many occasions. I was just here twice last week, so they're certainly doing what they need to do to keep us moving. So thank you very much, Lenzi. Thank you to Amy, Mrs. Governor, the First Lady of the Governor, and all of you, thank you for coming to Dracut. Today and all the days following, someone was going to go hungry. But there are organizations like the Merrimack Valley Food Bank that provide invaluable resources to our vulnerable residents. As the treasurer of the Dracut Food Pantry, I know all too well that without Merrimack Valley Food Bank, we would be scrambling for donations to meet the needs. It is with all the generous donations and the vast amount of volunteers, and of course your staff, that make your mission a success, and in turn makes our mission at the Dracut Food Pantry that much more successful. Thank you for partnering with us and for serving our residents in need. Thank you for inviting me this morning. And you all have a great day. Thank you.
So now I'd like to introduce someone who I've had the pleasure of knowing for about 8 years. She's on the board for the Massachusetts Nonprofit Network, and she represents the Nonprofit Alliance of Greater Lowell. And she's known for her work at the Merrimack Valley Food Bank as Director of Growth, and that's Amy Pessia.
Thank you, Jim, and thank you all for joining us today. When I was preparing to come to today's event, I found a pin that I'm wearing. I don't know if any of you noticed it. It says, "Go forth and serve." And it was so fitting that it just popped into my sight because it was the saying of a dear friend of the food bank and so many organizations and people here in the room today, and that is Steve Jones. Steve worked at John Darr Credit Union, and his job was to represent the credit union within the community organizations at events, and he did that so well. And he was the epitome of someone who serves. He served on committees and boards, and we miss him terribly. So I'm so honored to be wearing this pin today and to be talking with all of you and to serve alongside all of you. Today is about acknowledging and appreciating our colleagues, board members, and other volunteers. I'm in awe of our staff at the Merrimack Valley Food Bank who kept our neighbors nourished for the last 31 years. The last few years were extraordinary for everyone, and our food bank staff, board, and volunteers didn't miss a beat. We fed our neighbors through a gas emergency, a government shutdown. Then something happened that's a topic at everyone's dinner table for those of us fortunate to have food to eat. A health and economic emergency became reality, and we were terrified. We were terrified for our own and our families and our colleagues' health and well-being, but more for our neighbors who were already barely making ends meet. We spoke with new friends on the phone who called the food bank because they needed food. For many, it was the first time they ever had to ask for help. We sometimes cried with and always told them that it was okay. We were glad they were asking for help, and we got to connect them with local food pantries and meal programs that get food from the food bank. With generous support from individuals and companies who wanted to give, including some you'll hear from today, we provided nearly 5 million pounds of food, 4.25 million meals in 2021. 783,000 people received food through our network of food pantries, homeless shelters, senior centers, and schools in 30 communities. And we're just one of 4 food banks in the state. Some of our partner food pantries continue giving bags of groceries and meals to go in parking lots and on sidewalks, and they do whatever it takes. They provide food and friendship. I'm gonna use some statistics here for those of you who like stats. Prior to the pandemic, household food insecurity in Massachusetts was at 8.2%. According to Project Bread, the coronavirus pandemic fueled a hunger crisis unlike any other in our lifetime. That's an understatement. At its peak, it brought 19.6% of households in Massachusetts to be food insecure. And we know everyone was home. The kids weren't in school getting breakfast and lunch. People were working from home if they were fortunate enough to be able to hold their jobs. Recent data show that food insecurity has now risen closer to the high we saw in May of 2020. Rates had hovered between 15 to 17% in recent months, and for all households in the state, the current rate of food insecurity is 18.3%. The good news is it's still lower than that of the May 2020 peak, which was 19.6%. And there's also good news that organizations like all of you, like the food bank and our partner food pantries and other providers of services, are still serving our neighbors. Because of all of you here from the Merrimack Valley Food Bank and staff and board from our community partners, we're poised to continue serving children, seniors, neighbors with disabilities, veterans, and working families. They need nutritious food to grow, learn, work, or look for work, and to maintain health so they can heal physically and financially. You all deserve to be celebrated for your contributions that improve so many lives, and I personally thank you. I'd like to acknowledge some elected officials who've joined us today. In addition to Town Manager Ann Vandal, thank you so much for joining us. We have Paul Rathayem, who is a city councilor in Lowell. And State Representative Vanna Howard is joining us today. And one of the valued partners that I alluded to earlier is the Greater Lowell Health Alliance, which leads a group of healthcare providers, educators, business, civic, and community leaders with a common goal to improve the overall health of our neighbors. GLHA is led by Executive Director Kerrie, a supporter, partner, and friend of the food bank, and so many others who are concerned about the health and wellness of our community. And she leads an excellent team of staff who help us and who I personally looked forward to meeting with weekly, although it was on Zoom, because it helped us to stay connected with all of our community partners. I see heads nodding, and it was just one example of the way that this community of Greater Lowell, I think, is one of the most unique that I'll ever experience. And I'm proud to introduce my friend, Kerrie Detremont.
Thank you so much, Amy, and I do apologize, my printer wasn't working this morning, so I do have to use my laptop just to keep myself on point today. So thank you, Amy, for all of your work, and the Merrimack Valley Food Bank is such an important asset to this community as well, so thank you so much. And some of my staff, Hannah had to leave. We do have a simultaneous meeting happening today, so I do thank Devin and Amanda and Hannah for being here as well today. Amazing staff, as we're here to celebrate our staff. We couldn't do all the amazing work that we do with the GLHA without such an amazing team, so thank you. So the GLHA, as Amy mentioned, is a very unique organization, and we do attempt to bring everyone together. It doesn't matter where you're from, whether it's a social service organization, healthcare providers, business leaders, educators, civic and community leaders, with our goal to bring everybody together, identify and address our community's greatest health concerns, always with a focus on health equity. When COVID hit, we were just nimble enough to shift gears and bring people together to address this new urgent need that we were seeing in our communities. Our 6 task forces, as Amy mentioned, immediately began meeting virtually, offering an invaluable place for coordinating efforts throughout the shutdown. Organizations were able to share things like new hours or, where they're located now. A lot of things changed when the shutdown happened. People didn't know where to get resources. So this became a vital place for people to come, meet. We were able to share the urgent needs and address them as a community on a weekly basis. The GLHA partnered with Lowell General Hospital to implement wellconnected.net, a valuable resource hub. We worked and trained our community partners on how to use it, gather data, and the benefits to the public they serve. We were also able to quickly pivot our DON dollars, Determination of Need funding by Lowell General Hospital, to provide many grants to support new organizations that were coming forth to provide direct mutual aid like WAMA. In order to streamline support, we updated our mini grant application with a rolling deadline ranging from $250 to $2,000. Applications were reviewed on a weekly basis through our steering committee, also volunteers, and paid out monthly. This funding source was designed to support our community partners with educational materials around COVID, transportations to vaccine clinics, translations at clinics, and incentives. We're able to fund 15 organizations for over $20,000 through this effort. The GLHA received its first COVID grant from the Greater Lowell Community Foundation, and we were able to purchase $25,000 of PPE items in bulk. We released a simple PPE request form. Agencies could submit what they needed and arrange for pickup. Items included disposable masks, gowns, shields, thermometers, KN95 masks, and hand sanitizer. Through this effort, we were able to distribute PPE to approximately 40 local community nonprofit organizations, schools, local businesses, and churches just in a few months. And throughout COVID, GLHA gained a new purpose: to receive large donations of PPE and distribute widely through Greater Lowell. Many of you know, thanks to generous donations through places like Provisions Ministry, Ryan Davis of Dakota Warehouse, and DPH. Hold on to your seats. In the past 2 years, our tiny little staff of 4 have distributed 30,000 Lysol wipes, 65,000 bottles of hand sanitizer, 200,000 KN95 masks, 115 cloth masks, and 100 no-contact thermometers, and much more. We were also able to purchase and distribute $25,000 in family care packs and children's backpacks filled with hand sanitizer, hygiene items, and back-to-school supplies. Over the past 2 years, the PPE has been distributed to over 100 local community organizations, schools, local businesses, churches, and temples. In December of 2020, Lowell Community Health Center CEO Sue Levine approached the GLHA to partner on developing an equitable vaccine distribution and educational community effort. We jumped at the chance to collaborate on this effort, knowing what a challenge this would be, but we didn't realize how powerful this effort really would be for our community. As a coalition, we always look to the strength of our many partners and our community leaders to help us with any endeavor. Very early in the vaccine distribution process, we saw that providing equitable access to a vaccine had never been more important for reducing the disproportionate effects that the virus had for people of color and preventing the widening health disparities going forward and achieving population immunity through a vaccine. So we began hosting weekly meetings starting on December 22nd, 2020. This was before there was even a vaccine. We brought 50 different community organizations together and leaders from those organizations, from representatives to medical experts from Lowell Community Health Center, Lowell General Hospital, and our local boards of health. At these meetings, we provided updates on COVID, prepared for vaccine distribution, highlighted the equity data, and engaged our community partners in the development of COVID-19 education materials that were specific to the populations of our community and the populations that each of our partners served. The GLHA also produced and distributed 2 surveys that helped inform educational materials and the development of a partnership for equitable COVID-19 vaccine rollout. This was a strategy report that was shared with leaders of the City of Lowell, Lowell General Hospital, and Lowell Community Health Center, all places that had the ability to get vaccines and make an impact in distributing those vaccines. This document was prepared by Dr. Hannah Tallow, who unfortunately had to leave us, but she was here earlier, and community data, she's our community data and project manager, and Devin Goldberg, which was then our project coordinator, both with the GLHA. This important guide really helped us resource and allocate those, target those resources to specific neighborhoods. This guide identified potential points for community activation, for vaccine equity projects, focusing on community-based organizations and faith-based sites, and all other place-based opportunities for vaccine clinics, vaccine appointment sign-up projects, transportation initiatives, and the identification of vaccine ambassadors. As a result of that report, we were able to partner with Lowell Community Health Center and Lowell General Hospital to support a community partner-driven vaccine clinic. The idea for this clinic was to decrease all the barriers that people were seeing in traditional online registration, sign up, and empower our community partners and trusted leaders to identify the vaccine needs of the populations that they serve. We utilized Lowell General Hospital mass vaccination program that was located at the time on Pawtucket Boulevard. On the day that they were closed, they had Wednesdays off for their volunteers, so they gave us a Wednesday, and they said, well, do you think you can do 1,000 vaccines? Well, we were able to work with our community partners from 25 different locations, CBA, International Institute, CMAA, CTI, and places like Elder Services. We were able to identify how many vaccines each of those places needed and the resources they needed to get people to clinics. We were also able to utilize places like CTI for transportation. And we increased the number of translators and medical interpreters for this day. Many of our community partners helped and assisted and volunteered at the clinic as well, and it was a great success. We were able to vaccine close to 1,700 people, and 930 of them had first doses with a 91% return rate, which was amazing at the time. The GLHA was awarded a second COVID relief grant from Community Health from the Greater Lowell Community Foundation in February of 2021. This was able to support our vaccine equitable distribution efforts, because early on we noticed there was a real lack of materials in general around COVID, but also a lack on the individual languages that we have here in Lowell. So we were able to develop a wide variety of shareable educational materials in multiple languages, updated our website, and hosted a new COVID vaccine page. This page was updated daily with community ambassador testimonials to show why people got their vaccine and share their vaccine experience. Thanks to DPH initiative, we were able to hire a full-time community outreach education manager, Devin, and 17 community outreach workers. Since April of this year, these outreach workers have worked close to 5,000 hours, assisting organizations like Dwelling House of Hope with their weekly food pantries, and providing outreach for weekly vaccines and offering assistance and translations at hundreds of vaccine clinics. Even with all these COVID efforts, we were also able to conduct a community health needs assessment this year. This assessment is done every 3 years, and it is a federal mandate for Lowell General Hospital and Lowell Community Health Center, and the last community health needs assessment was done in 2019. So this assessment is really vital. It guides us through the work that we do. It guides a lot of our organizations through the work that they do throughout the year. It also helps us develop a community health improvement plan, which we'll be working on over the next year. This assessment helps identify our community's health priorities, but this year it's really become an invaluable tool to help us address the effects that COVID has on our already stressed community. So I know that's all I have time for today, but we do look forward to releasing the 2020 Community Health Needs Assessment at our annual meeting next month. And you can see the full report of our Community Health Needs Assessment on Lowell General Hospital's website if you can't wait. We are also to have been received this year an additional LGH Shields DON. So we will be releasing $355,000 in grants next month. So we're really thrilled to have that much funding to go out to support our communities in these efforts. I am truly grateful for our amazing team and staff at the GLHA and our amazing supportive board of directors. Without them, truly none of this work would happen, and truly without your help and assistance as well, because the GLHA isn't just for staff, we are truly a united community. So with that, and I know I've talked really fast because I knew I had 6 minutes and I'm sure I went over, but with that, I would love to introduce Jay Linnehan from the Greater Lowell Community Foundation, and thank you for your time.
I gave you like 2 pages of notes to introduce me. Didn't say any of
I
that.
ran out of time.
I know, but you should have done it at the beginning then. Yeah. Anyways, it's my pleasure really to be here this morning with all of you. As we talk about appreciation, let me just express my appreciation. These last 2 years have been crazy, to say the least. But during those last 2 years, I think one of the things that has been absolutely amazing is how everybody stepped up. Everybody worked together to get done what needed to be done from lots of different places, lots of different support. The little stories that I could tell would take way longer than I've got the time, but they would all be, they would all be inspiring as to how we do that. One of the stories, and we told this story 2 years ago at Celebrate Giving, was how the Mass COVID Relief Fund stepped up. And of course, we have our special guest here today, First Lady Lauren Baker, who spearheaded that particular effort. And so that particular effort raised about $32 million. And so as they were going through all this, and I love the discussion we had a couple of years ago, it was like, how did you decide that it goes through the community foundations? And here was a bunch of folks that were from out of Boston, but across the state, that were like, we need to do something outside of Boston. Boston had created some funds, but let's get some money outside of Boston. So this major effort started, and they were like, how do we do this? Well, as I'm sure over the dinner table or whatever, there was a discussion with the First Lady and the Governor. Well, folks may remember the gas explosion in Lawrence a number of years ago. And the government, the state, relied on Essex County Community Foundation to distribute all those funds. And as they were looking as to what to do, it was like, well, we can create this nonprofit, or we can do this, we can do that. Any of that would have taken way longer than they needed, because the thing that was really amazing about the last couple of years is how quickly support was raised and how quickly it got out to the community to take care of the folks that needed it the most. So in the infinite wisdom of the First Lady and her crew, they said, we're gonna do it through the community foundations. And as we were having that discussion a couple of years ago, I'd asked that question. It was like, so what was so important to you about the community foundations? And the word that resonates with me the most when I recount the story was the trust. It was all about the community foundation and all the folks that I work with in this room that know each other. We know what each other does. It's grassroots philanthropy, it's boots on the ground in the community, making certain that the needs that have to be met are met to the most vulnerable people in our community, the work that you guys do every single day, and that the folks in our community have the faith and respect and the confidence to come to get services from the local nonprofits in a way that is respectful and dignified. $32 million was distributed all across the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. A little footnote is all those community foundations formed a collaborative that is currently being active today, doing lots of other work, much of which was inspired by you pulling us all together back in 2020. So thank you for that. So $32 million, 2.1 of that was distributed to the Greater Lowell Community Foundation. And in addition to that, as I mentioned, so many people just stepped up. We've allocated in excess of $7 million so far in COVID relief funds on almost a daily basis, starting back from March of 2020. And here we are today, wonderful to have everybody in the room, seeing each other. I've really missed the in-person stuff. There was many, many weeks that I was in the office by myself, opening the mail, but getting those lovely letters from people and checks from folks saying, here's money to help the people who need it the most. And I'm happy to say that we've got a great team at the Greater Lowell Community Foundation. They're in the table in the back. You guys can just wave a little bit and give them applause. And I'm also happy to recognize Chet Sablack, who is the board chair, who has great guidance and great service for the Greater Lowell Community Foundation, in addition to all the things he does at Enterprise Bank. So Chet, thank you so much for all your work. And then I want to come back to the Mass COVID Fund. Those dollars, if you think of the thousands of people, the most vulnerable in our community, and this was in June of 2020, when people were trying to figure stuff out. That was in and out the door, and they worked tirelessly with 14 or so other community foundations every single week, allocating dollars out. We'd expend them, we'd come back 2 weeks later with another request that would be funded. We always asked for way more than they told us to ask for, but that was okay. And we worked that a little bit, and Howard was funny. They said, put in for this, but let's do this. Sometimes we got that, sometimes we didn't. But it was a wonderful process about how our community steps up in the face of extreme adversity to come and assist the most vulnerable. So, on behalf of the foundation, and all the nonprofits that you assisted throughout that period, thank you so much. You would probably guess that the foray into the Mass COVID Fund is not the first time the First Lady's got involved. She does not sit still. She is a veteran of advertising world in both New York and in Boston, and today works for the as a marketing communications consultant for the Baker Group. Her continued passion for service and social responsibility is evident through her current work to increase awareness and raise funds for a number of different causes. Laura actively serves on the Regional Board of Directors for the American Red Cross, is a founding member of the Trinity Circle Society of Women Leaders, and also serves on the Phoenix Charter School Foundation Board, which provides funding to support programs serving at-risk teens, among a multitude of other things. Laura holds an undergraduate degree from Northeastern University, where she met her husband, and an MBA from Kellogg Graduate School of Management. She enjoys fitness, is a certified kickboxing instructor, which I'd like to know more about, and wishes she could ski more. Yeah, me and you both. Above all else, Lauren's proudest accomplishment is being the mother of 3 amazing adult children. As many folks may know or may not know, because I actually did not know this, is the role of the First Lady in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts is not defined. In different states throughout the country, the role of the First Lady is defined. The role of the First Lady has staff, has a budget, and of course, there is the governor's mansion that they all live in. That is not the case here in Massachusetts. The role of the First Lady is not defined. So, in Lauren's own words, I had to blaze my own trail. And indeed, you have done that. So it was my great pleasure this morning to introduce the First Lady of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, Lauren Baker.
Well, good morning, everyone. Wow, that's a lot to follow. Probably way more information than any of you care to have. Yeah, and I haven't been certified to teach kickboxing in a while. So, yeah, when you get older, it's not as easy as it used to be. Well, I'm really honored to be invited to speak to this group today. You guys, I had exposure to a lot of communities around the Commonwealth, and you guys really led the way in stepping up and creating this incredible network of nonprofits and volunteers and can-do people. And I'm really honored to be with you today, and I thank you for all that you have done. So I'll try to talk kind of fast because I was given 6 minutes and 8 pages of notes. I want to offer you just a few thoughts about the work of nonprofits that I've experienced during the last few years, and on an ongoing basis. We all know how disruptive the pandemic has been for families and for our communities, but the silver lining is it also highlighted the very, very best that the people of Massachusetts can bring to an emergency situation. And I have been so lucky, and I'm so grateful to have had the opportunity to participate in and bear witness to just the incredible number of acts of kindness and the generosity of the people of Massachusetts, which, everywhere across the Commonwealth, Massachusetts steps up every time to serve their neighbors in the most incredible and creative ways. You heard we launched the COVID-19 Relief Fund in the very early days of the pandemic. I think, in sort of early March, it sort of dawned on me that I couldn't say, geez, that's terrible, and change the channel. I was living with it every minute of every day. It never, the data was changing every 15 minutes, and we just had to keep going, and I couldn't sit there. I had to figure out what to do. And it became clear really quickly that we couldn't wait. We just couldn't wait for the feds. We couldn't wait for them to figure out how they were going to help or what they were going to do or how the money was going to get there. Even the state couldn't move fast enough because we were hearing, the grocery store is closed. People are literally starving right here in Massachusetts. People don't know where their next meal is coming from. People are, worried about getting booted out of their housing, and people can't access health care. People are terrified. They won't leave their homes, and if you can't leave your home, it's really hard to do anything. Based on the experience with the Merrimack, the valley, the gas explosions, and the success that the state had working through the community foundations, we we spent like 2 weeks, Joanna Jacobson and I, working with various people from the state saying, okay, how do we stand up an organization really fast? Like, people need food tomorrow. We can't wait around. And we did go through a bunch of different business models trying to figure out how we could stand this thing up. And in the end, we worked like 24 hours a day trying to set up a nonprofit. And then we're like, this is stupid. We don't have the time. So we just threw that away, started from scratch, and realized that we had to take advantage of existing infrastructure and relationships. There was no time to build anything. And so the community foundations were right there. So we quickly identified, I think, 9 community foundations. We built a website, we did everything in 2 weeks, and we launched this thing publicly in April of 2020. And the mission of the COVID-19 Relief Fund was to coordinate philanthropic activity for vulnerable populations and essential workers who were facing food and housing insecurity and the loss of critical services. We worked really, really fast, and we raised over $33 million. Thank you very much. We literally raised, I was shameless and called, I made thousands of phone calls. I called CEOs, I called everybody. And we raised $30 million in 10 weeks. And that's an incredible thing. And so this fund only existed, it's an emergency fund, only existed from April until October. And in that time, we raised and deployed $33 million. That was over the course of 7 rounds of grant making, like you heard. And during that time, we made 872 grants to support the work of 560 individual nonprofits in every corner of Massachusetts. We made partnerships, we made grants through our partnerships with 13 community foundations, as well as 5 organizations dealing with food insecurity, one of which was the Merrimack Valley Food Bank. So I want to take 1 minute and just thank you for your partnership in this. It made a huge, huge difference. The COVID Relief Fund worked really hard to deploy these funds really, really quickly. We were really feeling the urgency of the need. And there's no way that we could have gotten this done without the individual efforts of all of you in this room and all of the nonprofits and the volunteers who were the boots on the ground across the state. So I just thought I would share a couple of key lessons that I learned throughout this process. The first is that the need exists. There is significant need in every city and town in Massachusetts. And that's why we really designed the COVID Relief Fund to operate everywhere outside Boston. There's a lot of deep pockets in Boston, and my old boss, Jack Connors, worked really quickly to raise $30 million. That was called the Boston Resiliency Fund, and that was awesome and great. And there's a lot of need in Boston, but there's so much more need outside of Boston, and so that's what our goal was, to spread the money around the Commonwealth and reach into pockets of need where the funding doesn't usually it's not deep enough. So we were really, really intentional about pushing the resources out to every corner. The second thing is how critical partnership is. No one organization can do this alone, and when we work together, we are so much more impactful. And it really drove home for me that private and nonprofit organizations are so much more agile and than state entities can ever hope to be. And generally speaking, nonprofits and private entities know their communities really well, and they know where the needs are, and they know how to make things happen in their communities. So when time is of the essence and you're targeting specific groups, we can't wait for state agencies or the feds to help us make it happen. So the big food banks, for example, are a critical resource for people facing food insecurity across the state, but access is a problem, and getting basic food supplies to people outside the cities is an issue, because the big food banks people can't physically get to the big food banks all the time, and the food banks can't transport goods out into the community. So building capacity outside the bigger cities and outside the bigger food banks is critical. So your partnerships as a food bank with local food pantries and community service organizations brings food closer to the people who need it, and it spreads out that volunteer energy a little bit more effectively. The pandemic and these volunteer efforts really provided an opportunity for the state government to recognize the importance of this reality and to respond to it better by supporting local organizations. So in 2020, the Commonwealth created the Food Security Infrastructure Grant Program, which aims to build the food access system in communities across the Commonwealth. That program awards grants to local food pantries, food banks, farms, fisheries, nonprofits, and other organizations, all with the goal of better connecting resources to the local communities where the need is the greatest. So far, that program has awarded over $58 million to 500 organizations. Additionally, one of the things I really was struck by was that cultural needs create additional barriers to access, especially in food insecurity, to populations who are already struggling. And there's no doubt that that was exacerbated by the pandemic, but it also provided us with so many examples of how these partnerships are critical. For example, the Hmong community outside Fitchburg really just, they weren't accessing the local food pantries. Because they couldn't eat any of the food that was provided by a food pantry. So there was this group of women who knew this community because they taught English as a second language. And they realized really quickly that the people in their language classes weren't able to access culturally appropriate food. So they pivoted, stopped teaching English, and learned how, and helped this community source culturally appropriate food from other channels. And we heard about the federal school lunch program that had to pivot. They helped in Boston. The Boston Public Schools helped implement this, and we did it across the state, where the federal school lunch program funded meals that were delivered to people. Well, in East Boston, there's a sizable Muslim community that also couldn't eat the food that was being distributed by the school lunch program. So a local nonprofit called Mutual Aid Eastie worked with a local restaurateur and got funding so that the restaurateur could provide suitable halal food for the Muslim community there. And these stories just highlight the resilience and the creativity and the resourcefulness of the nonprofit community here in Massachusetts. Organizations who pivoted on a dime to serve the communities where they were and get them what they needed, even if it meant building completely new skill set to do it. So now we're moving forward, and how are we going to learn from all this incredible lessons that we got during the pandemic? And I think that as nonprofit leaders, as community volunteers, and as philanthropists, we really have to focus on and try to maintain that can-do attitude, that creativity and innovation that everybody experienced during the pandemic, because it'll help us be better going forward. So as nonprofits, we learn that we can pivot our service delivery models to meet populations wherever they are. In some cases, we learned that we need to change what we do first in order to enable the people we serve to be able to accept our traditional services. You know, a child who is hungry can't benefit from a literacy program or music lessons, or they can't. So we have to reach out and do what we have to do. And I think as nonprofit leaders, we've got to cultivate that attitude of we can do it. Whatever it is, we can do it, and we will make it happen. And we have to also remember our volunteers. I think volunteers are getting tired. You all were in it every single day, and people have this sense that the pandemic is waning, and people are going back to work, and volunteer hours are dropping in some cases. And so as nonprofit leaders, we've got to figure out, what do our volunteers need from the nonprofit to be able to continue to serve, you know, and to help us succeed. As volunteers, we learn that the people of Massachusetts will always step up, and they're willing to help their neighbors in whatever is needed. And we also know that when we help others, we build resiliency in the face of trauma. It's satisfying and fulfilling for us as volunteers. So how do we remember that and keep that top of mind and encourage and build upon that with our friends, our families, our colleagues, to keep this level of volunteerism high across Massachusetts? I don't have the answer to that, but we have to focus on that. And as philanthropists, we know that there is significant need outside the big cities. And philanthropy overall has to maintain that focus and try to continue to push funding out into the neighborhoods, the communities where it's needed most, well beyond our cities. The COVID Relief Fund, we learned really quickly that the community foundations were a great way to do this. We could leverage their existing infrastructure, their relationships, and we really relied on this trust philanthropy, where we would give grants out and trust the locals and the boots on the ground to vet the organizations and to be able to identify where the needs were most significant and who would be the best to deploy those funds effectively to get resources where they were needed. The pandemic obviously created lots of challenges for all of us, but it was also an incredible opportunity to be really creative and innovative about the way we serve our neighbors. And to me, the most important lesson of all was that in the darkest of times, when it's probably the most difficult to do, the people of this Commonwealth and all of you in this room step up time and time again to help their neighbors in need. And you know, it's been an incredible opportunity for me to be able to look out across the entire Commonwealth and to see people like you in every corner who care and who set the bar really high for service and who come back every day to make sure that they are improving the lives of their neighbors in their communities and making things happen so that life is better for all of us in Massachusetts. I'm really inspired by your creativity and your ingenuity and your commitment to serving your community. And I am so very grateful that you all did what you did and that you will continue to do that, I'm sure, as time goes on. Thank you for setting the bar high and thank you for doing what you do every day. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Lauren. I saw Lauren for the first time in person this morning.
That's right.
We got to meet on Zoom during the time in which she deployed and gathered a talented and dedicated group of for-profit, non-profit organizations, including the Greater Lowell Community Foundation, Essex County Community Foundation. And I also want to acknowledge our arts-focused members of the nonprofit world, including the Brush Art Gallery and Merrimack Repertory Theater. And as a gift for joining us today and all of your work, even though we're the Greater Lowell Nonprofit Alliance, this is a piece from Janet Lambert Moore, who is a beloved Lowell-based artist, and this is St. Anne's Church in Lowell in winter. Even though it's covered in snow, it's always warm here in Lowell because of all of our nonprofits, our collaborative, communicative, and non-competitive, for the most part, relationship with one another. So we hope that you will display this proudly wherever you like, and remember the Mill City and we appreciate your contributions as First Lady of the state, and we hope that you enjoy the next chapter in your lives.
Thank you. Thank you.
And that concludes the program. May I ask that the board members of the NPA come up to the front for a few photos?